I always forget to
You
begin
have to
before.
be able to test something.
Okay, good. You have to be. So what makes an experiment is you have to be able to test something. What do you mean by test it? What does that actually look like?
You got to like get people together and test two theories against each other to see which is greater or whatever you're trying to do with it.
Okay, good. So we're getting a group together and we are testing really two different things. So we're not really testing theories. Does anyone else want to kind of piggyback on that? How exactly are we testing two things in an experiment? A lot of what you just said is right, but there's a little bit of clarification that we can make. What makes an experiment is that whatever you're trying to test, whatever your question is, if you think that chicken noodle soup cures the flu, or you think that masks prevent the spread of COVID. So we are testing the hypothesis, that's true. But the way that we're testing it is we want to manipulate that thing that we think is going to cause something else. So we're actually going to go in and we ourselves, the experimenters, we change, we control how that thing changes. So for example, if we think that chicken noodle soup is going to cure the flu, we actually want to go in and we want to control whether people are drinking chicken noodle soup or not. Or if we think that chewing peppermint gum before an exam is going to increase your exam score, then we actually need to control whether people are chewing that gum or not. Why is that important? Why is it important that we control those things in an experiment? What does that allow us to conclude from our study? What does an experiment allow you to conclude that no other study design allows? This is the key. An experiment. Go ahead, Brian.
Is it some other variable that causes that you? Is it like so you can see the relationship between the other two variables that you're testing?
Sort of. So in all designs, we're testing whether we see a relationship between two variables. So with a correlation, you can say, is your GPA, your grade point average, associated with your SAT scores? We'll get that relationship. But there's something unique that an experiment tells us about that relationship that you can't get from anything else. This is the only design that allows you to conclude that one thing causes another. And that's important. If we're trying to figure out whether a drug reduces depression or whether face masks stop the spread of COVID, what we specifically want to know is not whether wearing a face mask is associated or just related to whether COVID stops spreading. We actually want to know, does this face mask cause COVID to spread less often? We want to know the causal relationship. We want to know whether chicken noodle soup causes the flu to go away or whether it's something else, right? It could be this third variable that we are not controlling for. So in an experiment, what we're doing is we're changing that independent variable. And these are two terms I want you to be very familiar with, the difference between an independent and a dependent variable. What's the difference between those two? What's an independent variable?
Something that can stand alone.
Okay. What does that mean? Break that apart for me. What do you mean by that?
That it doesn't need another variable to make the experiment, I guess. Like it can be by itself and you can still test it. It doesn't depend on something else.
That's not quite. Anyone else want to take a stab at that?
Is it
So
something?
we actually need both of these variables, because if we don't have one or the other one means nothing to us, because we're trying to compare the two.
Is it something that you control in the experiment to get the dependent variable?
Yes, it's the thing that you control. It's the thing that you, as the experimenter, are changing. Independent's kind of a misleading term, right? So independent, it makes you think, oh, it can stand alone. But what it really means is it's the thing that you are going to change. You are going to have control over it. So this is the thing that we manipulate. So in the case of, I think Snicker bars are going to make me feel less hungry. I'm going to manipulate whether people have, I might give some people Snicker bars and I might give other people nothing. Or maybe I give them a Milky Way, because I don't think Milky Ways are gonna satisfy hunger as much as Snicker bars are, right? So I'm actually manipulating what candy you get. Okay, so then what's a dependent variable?
The results you get from the independent variables?
A dependent variable is what outcome will we measure?
Sorry, what was that, Brantley?
Is what outcome we will measure.
Exactly, yes, the outcome. And Ryan, you got that, I think, right too. It's the outcome, it's what we're measuring. So what is that thing that we think the independent variable is going to cause? If Snicker bars causes you to be less hungry, then hunger is going to be the dependent variable. It's the outcome, all right? And then Ryan, you mentioned this as well. Another important part of the experiment is that we are controlling for, we're holding constant all the other third variables. So if there's something else that could be causing, say Snickers to reduce hunger, we're going to control for that. This is why an experiment allows us to conclude about causation. When we take one thing and we just manipulate that one thing. So let's say we gather a group of people. We gather 30 people, okay, and we divide them up into 10 groups, into 3 groups of 10. Where we have 10 people, we give them a Snickers bar. We have another group of people, we give them a Milky Way. And then we have another group of people that we give them nothing. It's our control group. If we then follow them across time and we then, they eat their bar, they eat their Milky Way, whatever, and then we measure their hunger, we know that the only difference between those 3 groups is what bar we gave them, right? So then we can conclude that it was specifically giving people a Snickers bar that decreased their hunger. Because if we look at, say, at the just hypothetical data, we look at the Snickers group, we look at the group that got nothing. If Snickers group report less hunger than the control group, then we know that the Snickers bar caused less hunger. Now compare that to something like a correlational design. Let's say we're just kind of comparing, we're asking people, we get the whole group, we get 30 people together, okay? And we just say, how many Snicker bars have you eaten this week? And then we also ask them, how hungry do you feel right now? And so we find, and we just record, everyone gives their answer of, oh, I've eaten 2 Snicker bars, I've eaten 5, I had a really bingy week, so I've eaten 20 of these things. And so we can see how the number of bars is related to their hunger. What we might show is, as people eat more Snickers, the less hungry they are. But it could be that more Snicker bars are making them less hungry, or it could be that the people who are already eating more Snicker bars, they already eat more food, right? So they're just gluttonous people. They love to just eat. And so they're going to be less hungry because they just eat a lot, not necessarily because they're eating Snickers. Do you see that difference? Do you see that distinction between a correlational design and an experiment? If you don't control what is changing, you can't conclude that one thing causes another. You can't conclude that that thing that you're changing or not is causing a change in something else. Okay. So here's what I want to do. I want to run through and I want us to experiment designing, I want us to, practice designing experiments. And let's go with this example. This is something I brought up again and again in last class as well. We want to know whether chicken noodle soup actually cures the flu. How would we test that? How would you experimentally test that? You may have an idea, and we'll run through that idea, but here is a guideline that I want to give you. When you start to design your own experiment, you should ask these questions for yourself, to yourself. What is the independent variable? That's step one. Then what is the dependent variable? Then once you identify each of those variables, you're going to figure out how to operationalize the variable. And what does it mean to operationalize a variable?
Measure.
Yes, define it by how you would measure it. Right? Okay. Then figure out what is your hypothesis. So once you have your variables right out in front of you and you know, okay, I'm going to be measuring this and I'm going to be measuring this, you're then going to make your hypothesis. You're going to make a prediction of how you think the first set of variables are associated with the second set. And then really just then start asking yourself, what are you going to ask participants to do? What's that experiment actually going to look like? All right, so let's run through this. If we're trying to experimentally test whether chicken noodle soup helps cure the flu, what is the independent variable here?
How much
Wouldn't it-
chicken noodle soup?
Yes.
How much chicken noodle soup?
Yes, right. How much chicken noodle soup? So chicken noodle soup is our independent variable. That's the thing that we're going to change. Okay, what's the dependent variable? Someone else. Thank you, Ryan. What's the dependent variable? What's our outcome? What do we think that chicken noodle soup is going to cause? Good, curing the flu, yes. So that's our dependent variable. All right, let's operationalize the variables. How would you operationalize, let's start with the dependent variable because this usually tends to be the easiest one to operationalize. How would you operationalize whether the flu gets cured or not? How do you know whether someone gets over sickness?
Can't you get like people, like one group that only eats chicken noodle soup and I think Sprite we said, and then another group that eats other stuff and see which one gets over it faster?
Okay, yes, that's what the big study is going to look like. So you've already operationally defined the independent variable. So let's focus on that last part, getting over the flu. How do you know someone's gotten over the flu? How would you measure that?
Have them do a flu test.
Okay, yeah. So you could actually test for the flu, the presence of the flu in their body. That's one way. Other ways. There are multiple answers to this question. How do you know someone's gotten over the flu? How do you know someone has the flu?
When they start to like feel sick and like drowsy and yucky.
Yeah, good. So you could ask them to report maybe on a I encourage you not to use scales from 1 to 10 too much, but this is a legitimate way to operationalize these things. You could ask them, self-report, how icky do you feel right now? How sick do you feel? Or how sweaty do you feel right now, right? And then they could report, oh, I'm kind of like a 3. I'm not super sweaty, but maybe a little bit. Or no, I'm dog sick, right? I'm a 9 on sweatiness right now. That's another way. How else do we? So if a child is sick, how do you figure out whether they're sick or not? sometimes you can't trust what a child says.
Their temperature.
Yeah, temperature is a way of measuring it. That gives you a solid number. You can see whether their temperature has either gone up or gone down. That's an excellent dependent variable. So now, how are we going to do the independent variable, which we know is chicken noodle soup? I think it was Haley, it was you who kind of said we're going to divvy people up into groups, right? So what are those groups going to look like?
Some people like group just say A, they eat only chicken noodle soup and drink Sprite or ginger ale or whatever. And then like group B, they eat the normal other foods that people eat when they're sick. I don't know any other foods, or just like any kind of food, and see which group gets over which faster. Well, the flu faster.
Okay, good. So we're going to have a group that gets chicken noodle soup, a group that gets normal food. Would anyone add a third group?
Could you like measure the cups of chicken noodle soup they're getting a week? Like have some get 0, one get 2, and then one get 5?
Okay, good. I like that a lot. So maybe it's an entirely reasonable way to do it to just say you're getting chicken noodle soup. Maybe you're getting a can of it, right? But maybe we want to vary how much they get. Maybe to really see the effect of chicken noodle soup, we need to give people, 3 bowls a day. And then we need to give other people, maybe we think it's just 1 bowl a day. So maybe we need to vary the quantity. So we might give some people 3 bowls a day. We might give other people 1 bowl a day. So that's one change that we can make. And I think that would kind of give us a more, we'd be able to pinpoint how much chicken noodle soup is necessary. But then what else do we need? There's another group that we need that we don't have yet. How many noodles, maybe I'm throwing in some vegetables in there versus the processed, chicken, Campbell's stuff. Sure. Yes. Still, there's one more group that we need that we absolutely must have. What are we comparing all of these experimental groups to? We could compare it to they are simply eating whatever normal food they would eat, but there's another kind of group like that we need. So we've been describing the experimental groups. What's the other kind of group that we need? Experimental and
Control.
you got it, control. We need a control group. Now, if you're comparing people who get chicken noodle soup to people who just kind of get whatever normal food they'd get, that normal food would be a control group because it's not chicken noodle soup. But another control group that you need is they don't get anything, right? So we need to compare it against whether they don't get any food at all. Because here's what might happen. If we compare chicken noodle soup to people just eating whatever normal food they'd get, if we see a difference between those groups, it could be, or if we see similarities between those groups, probably more importantly, if we see similarities, what it could be is simply eating any food is causing people to get better. And so we need that control group where people don't get anything to rule out the possibility that just eating food is something that helps people get better. And it doesn't matter whether it's chicken noodle soup or whether it's, salad or whether it's, I don't know, macaroni and cheese, right, to feel better. So we need that control group to compare to where they get nothing to compare against the experimental groups. That's important. We always need a control group. Always need a group where people just aren't receiving the treatment. Okay, so we have our two operationalized variables. Independent variable is chicken noodle soup. We're varying how many cups of chicken noodle soup they're getting. Our dependent variable is their temperature, or whether we test them for the flu and whether they have the flu, or their self-reported feeling of ickiness. So what is our hypothesis then? What is our prediction?
I would predict that people who eat chicken noodle soup for their meals or whatever, they will get better and they will get over the flu faster since they'll have more liquids in their body.
Good. That's an excellent prediction. Now let's substitute sorry, I think I'm frozen a little bit. It's like, okay. That's a good prediction. Let's now substitute in our operationalized variables within that sentence. So you think that, okay, as people eat chicken noodle soup, they're going to be more likely to get over the flu. Let's use the operationalized measures. So as people eat what? Not just chicken noodle soup, but more. How are we measuring that chicken noodle soup?
Eat more like bowls.
More bowls, yes. So as people drink more cups or more bowls of chicken noodle soup, what's going to happen to the dependent variable? What's changing? You predict that.
I predict that the people that eat more bowls of chicken noodle soup will get better faster rather than the people that eat normal food.
Yes. How are we measuring whether they get better?
By like taking temperatures, self-reports, things like that.
Okay, good. I'm being nitpicky here, but this is important just for kind of precision. So we're predicting, our prediction should be, as people drink more bowls of chicken noodle soup, their temperature will do what?
Decrease.
Decrease. Yes. We need to make a very clear prediction about how those variables are going to change. So we can't just say, oh, they're going to get better. We need to specifically say, I think that this is going to decrease or this is going to increase. And that'll show whether they get better. But we need to specifically talk about our operationally defined variables. So if we were someone else, if we were going to restate this hypothesis, except about how sick someone feels on a 1 to 10 scale, how would you make that prediction? So I predict what is our prediction if our dependent variable is self-reported feelings of sickness? How sick you feel on a 1 to 10 scale. So it always begins with I predict. I predict that as people drink more bowls of soup, what's going to happen to the ratings of sickness? Self-reported sickness. As people drink more cups of soup, we predict that these self-reported sickness is going to decrease. So people are going to report lower scores on self-reported sickness. So as cups go up, self-reported ratings go down. Okay. Now, at this point, we have a lot of the information. Then what will participants be asked to do? What I'll ask you to do in these research proposals is actually describe this experiment. I'm going to ask participants to come into a lab, and I'm going to sit them down, and then I'll have 30 participants. I'm going to split them up into 3 groups. One group is going to get 3 bowls of soup per day. Group number 2 is going to get 1 bowl of soup per day. Group number 3 is going to get 0 bowls of soup per day. They're then going to drink those bowls of soup or not. They'll do what they're asked to do, and then we will record their body temperature after a day or after a week. Again, there's no right answer. You can design this any way that you want, but you're going to have to describe that for me. Actually run me through what that study would look like. Okay. Let's do one more. Here's our question, our $1 million question. How might we experimentally test whether face masks prevent the spread of COVID? Once we run me through it, what's our independent variable?
The number of people wearing the face mask.
Okay, good. So if we think face masks are going to cause something, our independent variable, the thing that's going to change is whether people are wearing masks or how many people are wearing masks. Good. What's our dependent variable? What is our outcome? Oh no, everyone's too tired.
The number of COVID cases.
Okay, good. So the spread of COVID, and in this case, we could measure that by saying the number of cases. All right, so how are we operationalizing our variables? Someone other than Ryan.
The people that wear masks, like the number of them that don't get COVID versus the number of people who get COVID.
Good. So how are we going to measure the number of people who get COVID? What are we actually counting up there? How do you test whether someone has COVID or not?
Stick that little toothpick, not toothpick, what's it called? Cotton, whatever it's called, up their nose.
Yeah, a swab, or
Yeah.
something like a swab. Yeah.
Stick out their nose and see who gets a positive result.
There you go. So you do these swab tests and you see how many come back positive. That's an indicator of the spread of COVID, right? Okay. What is our hypothesis?
I predict that the number of people who wear masks, the number of positive cases of COVID will go down.
Perfect. Love it. Yes. As people wear more masks, we're going to expect that the number of positive cases go down. Okay. What's the study actually going to look like? Now remember, we're controlling the number of masks. So how are we going to manipulate all that? What's that going to look like? Someone run me through this. How are we going to divide people up into the groups? So how are we to manipulate the independent variable? How are we going to do that?
Couldn't we ask like a certain amount of people in group A and group B to like group A wears a mask and go out, live their daily lives, and then report back to us, and then group B who don't wear a mask goes out, live their normal daily lives, come back and report to us and see positive versus negative cases?
Absolutely. That's perfect. Yes. You recruit a bunch of people, any number, so we could say 20. We ask 10 people to wear a mask every single day, every time they leave their home. The other group, we say, you cannot wear a mask. Now, maybe this is a little bit unethical in the current environment, but you cannot wear your mask, and then you go out, and then you live your daily life, right? So we control whether they wear a mask or not. They have no say in that whatsoever. They have to do what we're saying. And then we ask them to go out, they interact, they do their thing, and then we test them for COVID. Now, the way that COVID works is usually you need to wait like a couple of days before you can reliably test positive. So maybe we wait a week later and we see how many people we test them a week later, and then we see how many people have a positive case.
I
And then
have
we
a
can
question.
compare. Yep, go ahead.
Can't we also do like the number of cases with like the regular face mask versus like the face shields?
Oh yeah, that's a good one. So what would that look like then? If you wanted to compare face masks to shields, how would we change our design?
It was basically the same. You get group A to do a face mask, like an actual one, and then group B do face shields, and see which like how many per case comes up in the different groups. Like if half of the people with face shields come up positive but half don't, we can take that into an effect, and then the group A same way.
Good. What's the third group that we need though?
The controlled,
Yep, the control. Good. So we're going to have the face mask, we're going to have the face shield, but again, we still need the control.
which is the people who don't have the face mask at all.
Correct. People who don't do anything. No face mask, no shield. Why? Why do we need that control group?
Because we need to see if wearing something versus nothing or even a little bit of something will affect anything.
Exactly. Yes. We always need to be able to compare our experimental groups to the condition where no one's doing anything. We need to just know whether even doing anything helps, right? Yep.
So is your control group always 0?
So basically, yes. I mean, you could be giving someone something, but it has to be missing the intervention that you want to test. So with face masks, this is kind of hard to demonstrate, but let me give you another example with drugs. With drugs, well, most drug tests, there are 2 control groups. One where the group receives absolutely nothing, but then another control group where they receive a sugar pill. So if we're testing an antidepressant, they're not actually receiving the chemical. So it's still that they're not receiving anything, but they're receiving something that at least looks like a pill, so that you're getting people to kind of go through that action of, well, maybe people are getting better just because they are actually taking that action of taking a pill, right? Maybe something about putting a pill in your mouth makes you feel better, right? So yes, a control group is always the absence of doing something. You are not giving whatever intervention you want to test. In this case, you're not giving them face masks, or you're not giving them the drug, or you're not giving them a Snickers. Yeah. Good question. All right, good. Does anyone want to, so here's my opportunity. Here's an opportunity to do this. Do any of you want to take one of the hypotheses that you've designed, that you submitted this week, and do you want to make an experiment out of it? Again, the advantage of this is we get to brainstorm right now, and if it's your hypothesis, you get to use this experimental design for your research proposal. So anyone motivated?
Can I just say mine and see how we work it out? Because I got it wrote down. I don't know if it's completely correct or not. But hold on, let me find it.
Absolutely.
But I have the question for it is, does writing in color really help you remember what you're writing versus writing in black ink or just regular pencil?
Yes, that'd be a perfect one. We can easily do that one. Yeah. How would we make that into an experiment?
So wouldn't the independent variable be the people that is writing in color, and then the dependent would be the right people writing in black ink, or is it vice versa?
What do the rest of you think? Is that right? Are those the independent and dependent variables?
Can you read?
Yeah, go ahead, repeat it. So,
Okay. The question of the variables.
so I guess both. So the question is, does writing in color help you
Remember what you wrote
Yes.
versus if you write in black ink or just pencil, if you'll remember better then. And then, go ahead. Sorry.
The independent variable, you're saying the independent variable is what?
So I was thinking, I don't know if this is correct, that I would basically control the people writing in color, and then the dependent is writing in black ink or pencil.
So remember that go ahead, Ryan.
Wouldn't you say the independent is like the type of color they're writing in, and then the dependent is the information?
Yes, I would say that. So the independent variable is simply what color they're writing in. So that's going to include both colored and black and white. So what you're manipulating is what color they're writing in. What's your outcome? What do you think is going to be affected by or caused by the color?
For me, I said I predict that the number of people that wrote in color will be more likely to remember than those who wrote in black ink or pencil.
Good. So what's the outcome?
That the people writing in color will remember.
Just get rid of the color. So just how much they remember.
They will remember like most things they wrote down versus anything else.
So sorry, I maybe I'm torturing you a little bit here. I apologize. The difference. So what I'm trying to get at is, so the dependent variable is just simply whether they remember or not, right? So you think that the color of the writing is going to influence or cause them to remember more or less, depending on what they write in. So your independent variable is the color of the writing, whether it's colored or whether it's black and white.
Okay.
Then the dependent variable is how much they remember. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
What you're doing there, and this actually happens a lot, I see this a few times, but one of the mistakes, I'll just warn this for everybody, one of the mistakes you may make in general is kind of saying that if you want to know how, say, for example, colored pencil versus black ink pencil or whatever affects something, people will say that the colored is independent and that the black and white is the dependent. But really what those are two levels of the independent variable. Those are the two groups, right? You're comparing colored to black and white. But what you actually think that writing is going to cause is how well they remember something. Does that make sense? Kind of divvying them up that way?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so that is good. That is good. What's that experiment going to look like then? Yeah. So let's run through the rest.
Go to like people would know it's an experiment, but not really. But everybody go to class, and then on just say left side of the classroom, people write in color, and on the right side, people write in black and white ink, or black and white. I mean black ink or pencil, and then have them like later that week, say it's on Monday, so on Friday, I guess, they'll have time to study, take a test and see which side of the room, whether it be right or left, got a better grade because they remembered the notes more.
Yes, that would work. So your experimental group is going to be what? So people in the experimental group are going to write in
Colored ink.
and then presumably the people in the control group are going to write in just black ink. Yeah. Now, do we need another group there? What do you guys think?
I mean, you could get a group of people who don't write anything, but then it's like they don't have anything to study, so they'll just fail out of the go.
And that may be true, but one of the things we do have to account for is maybe just writing anything down is going to be causing people to perform better, to remember.
Can't you do a group like C that draws pictures or does these little acronyms or anything to help them remember?
Okay,
Whether
sure.
that be color or black ink?
Yeah, we'd be adding kind of another variable to the study. You could do that, yes. Yes, you could do that. Still, though, we would still need that control group where people are doing nothing. Or maybe, I'm trying to think of a way to do a control group where they'd still be writing something, but it just wouldn't have any color. But the problem is if it doesn't have any color, then you can't see it. I think the solution here is you do need a group where they just don't take notes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, good. Okay, now, sorry, how are you measuring how well they remember what they wrote?
I would measure like the number of people who passed the exam because they remembered it versus the number who didn't do as well because they didn't remember it.
Good, yeah. Exam grades are a great dependent variable. They're a great outcome. Yep, that works. That's a test of memory. That's perfect. Yeah, that would work. So you could use that if that's your hypothesis. You could use that in your research proposal. Does anyone else want to throw one out there? I'm happy to practice these as long as you guys want. Make sure that we have this down. And there's no pressure for any single person to just go through the whole example. We can work collaboratively on these together, kind of help each other out if we get stuck somewhere. All right. Well, here's what I'll do then. I want to continue on. There are a few more things I want to cover, but if, as we're going through lecture, you're inspired and you kind of want to then share something a little bit later, maybe we'll loop back to this at the very end. Excuse me. Okay. I hope all that makes sense. I hope that's helpful. Again, it'll be a little bit before you have to do your research proposal, but this is available to you. This recording is here. These notes are here for you when you have to put it together. And maybe we'll have one more kind of practice session right before the next research proposal. Okay. All right. Here's what's happening next. So we are done with research methods, and now we're really going to start getting into what I think is the really good meat of the class, where we're going to talk generally how your brain works. We're going to talk about how people learn, how memories are formed. We're going to talk about consciousness. We're going to talk a little bit about people's personalities, how people get along, how things go wrong when they do go wrong. But to understand any of that, we need to understand biology. Now, this is a bias of mine. I actually want to, maybe I'll send out a poll here. How many of you enjoy biology? You can be honest. I can't see who's responding, so. How many of you have taken a biology class and you're like, yeah, this is my jam? Okay. That's actually a surprisingly high number. I usually get most people saying, no, I hate biology. So we got about 4 saying yes. Okay. All right. I'll stop that poll for now. I understand that some people like it more than others, and I am not going to go so deeply into biology that it's unnecessary. I like to focus on what I think is absolutely important to know about the biology of the nervous system. There are some things you just have to know. So we're going to go into some very limited chemistry. I'll talk about sodium and potassium ions. We'll talk about electrical charges. But again, it's going to be with the goal of teaching you how the neuron works. I'm not just going to teach it to you for the sake of you knowing, just random garbage about the neuron and the nervous system. It's all going to fit together eventually, I assure you. So those of you who may not enjoy biology, I hope you are motivated with the promise that this will pay off one day, okay, in understanding how our mind works. I want to ask some questions just to kind of gauge. Why do you think studying the biology of, why study the biology? Is it important? Should we study the biology of psychology? And if so, how might it help us? Do you think so? Our psychology is kind of this experience that we have. It's this. If you look in front of you, you're experiencing something right now, or your personality, or how you get along with people, or why you experience certain emotions. How could an understanding of biology help you understand all of those things? Maybe we need this question first. What part of the body is the psyche contained in? Where's your mind?
The brain.
Okay, part of it is the brain, and that's, I think, where everyone goes to at first. Is the psyche contained anywhere else?
Could it be like your chest? Because like if you get stressed out, sometimes your chest will hurt.
Okay, so the brain is going to be the center of everything, but the rest of your body affects how your brain feels, right? When you're hungry, your brain is operating in a way that's different from when you're full and you're satisfied. When you're hungry, you're probably much quicker to get angry, right? Or to be impatient with people. Or if you're tired, if your body is not rested, it's not repaired, you're probably more irritable, or you can't focus in class. Being sleep deprived does affect your brain. As much as you may think that you can operate on 3 hours of sleep, you probably can't. Some people are better at it than others, but it generally affects everybody. Okay, so it's your brain. It's also the rest of your body, though, right? How your body is currently behaving. Anywhere else that your psyche is contained. Some people would argue that there's some level of, maybe there's just a spiritual influence on our psyche. And so to some degree, you could argue that there's kind of an outside influence. But I'm going to make a more simple argument than that. We influence you, and everyone listening to this right now is being influenced by other people. You're being influenced by me. How your brain is working right now is in response to what I'm saying. So I am something out here that's influencing your psyche. So to some degree, how you're thinking and how your brain works is influenced by things that are outside of your body as well, by other people, by the things around you, by your circumstances. So your psyche is really this thing that is, yes, rooted in the experiences around you. It's rooted in your body, But there's a strong biological component too. And so your nervous system interacts with everything around you to produce what your thoughts are. So why is it then important to understand the biology? Because your psyche, your mind, is a product of the physical structures within your body. Your brain is a collection, we'll talk about this in the lecture this week, but your body is a collection of neurons. It's a collection of cells. Sorry, your nervous system is a collection of cells. And so really every thought that you have, every emotion that you have, every experience, you speaking, you listening, you falling in love, all of that is a product of this very real physical biological object in space, your mind, your body, and the physical things around you. So if we're going to understand how the mind works, we need to understand how the physical world works, and therefore how your biology works. Now, what does your nervous system do for you? So if we're saying that the psyche, so generally the brain, your neurons, everything that's kind of running throughout your body, that's your nervous system. What does your nervous system do for you? What function does it play?
Blood flow for your body.
Well, the blood is going to be through the circulatory system, so that's a little bit different. So your veins and your arteries, that's blood flow. The nervous system is separate from that. But the nervous system does affect, oh, I think I froze again. The nervous system does affect how blood flows. How? What would life be like if you didn't have a nervous system?
You wouldn't feel anything. Like if you get hurt, you wouldn't feel pain, and also you'll be like a little sludge on the floor.
Yeah, basically, right? You wouldn't feel anything. You wouldn't be able to move yourself, because you're right. If it weren't for our nervous system, you would, I mean, you maybe wouldn't be a sludge because your connective tissue and your muscles and your bones are all going to keep you in one structure, but you wouldn't be able to move, right? You'd just be sitting there or just laying probably because you wouldn't be able to balance yourself. What else wouldn't you be able to do? You wouldn't be able to talk. You wouldn't be able to interact with other people. You wouldn't be able to have complex thought. You wouldn't have these thoughts. You wouldn't have this experience at all. You would just kind of be this, I don't know, you'd just be kind of like stuck in darkness, not being able to do anything.
You'll be emotional just basically because you can't do anything or go anywhere with anybody and couldn't live your life.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be motivated to do anything. Motivation comes from your nervous system. So if you're hungry, if you're thirsty, your nervous system is responsible for those feelings. So you wouldn't be able to interact with the world around you. You wouldn't be able to move yourself. Here's the function of the nervous system. The nervous system communicates information. It sends information from one part of your body to another. So when you take your hand and you push it against the screen and you touch something, what you're doing is you're stimulating some neurons in the tips of your fingers, and then those neurons are sending an electrical signal up through your fingertips, through your hand, up your arm, all the way to your body, up into your brain. It's sending that information. There's information out here in the world. Oh, this screen is smooth, or oh, it's relatively cold right now, so when I touch this surface, I feel coldness. That is information that your body needs to understand, and it can't understand it. It doesn't know that it exists unless the nervous system is able to transport it to your brain and then do something with it, produce a response. That's why we have a nervous system, is to respond to the world around us. Now, in the recorded lectures for this week, I'm going to describe how a neuron works. First off, what the structure is, and then how we send that electrical signal, how we end up getting information from point A to point B. And a lot of that will be stuff that you need to study and just kind of look at, and there'll be a lot of new terms that I'll be throwing your way, and I'll want you to be familiar with those terms. But there's something else that I want to introduce to you, which I hope gives some structure, again, for the payoff of all this. Why is all this going to be useful? And what's going to be helpful here is a term that is called, there are these things that exist that are called heuristics. Has anyone ever heard of a heuristic before? Anyone who has ever done computer, like if you're really into computers, you'll run into the term heuristic eventually. Anyone know what this is? Well, here's the definition for you. It's a simple and efficient way of solving a problem. That is, this is a solution that might help you solve a problem, but doesn't always give you it doesn't always solve that problem correctly. So it's quick and it's efficient. In a life or death situation, a heuristic is something that's going to help you generally overcome a problem, but it may not always. We call those things rules of thumb, right? If you're in any given situation, you might have a rule of thumb, something that you should do, and it typically works, but it might not always work. That's a heuristic. So let me give you some examples of heuristics that you likely have. All right, someone starts choking. Time is of the essence. They could die soon if they don't breathe. What's your heuristic? What do you do?
Immediately start doing like the Heimlich maneuver.
Okay, Heimlich maneuver, right? You don't have to think about it. Just go right into Heimlich maneuver. How do you do that? How do you do the Heimlich?
You
Put
get
your
up, get
arms around.
behind.
Okay, put your arms around him, then
You put your arms around them, and then you like from behind and like push their stomach and try to get them to kind of push the air and get the whatever's stuck in them in their throat out.
okay. Close. Never go for the stomach. Stomach won't help you much. But what you do, arms around, you put one hand kind of palm flat over the other, and you put this against the person's chest. So right at the bottom of their chest usually, kind of not at that pointy part, but right above that. You then are going to push inward and upward. And the idea is that you want to put pressure on the lungs so that whatever air is still within the lungs, you're going to propel that air outside their throat and launch whatever is stuck in there. So they teach this, you know, maybe you've learned about the Heimlich maneuver in high school, you learned about it in a health class, maybe you took a first aid class once as part of your job, or maybe you were a Boy Scout, et cetera, et cetera. They teach this to people because in life or death moments, it's important to have this heuristic very well figured out. You don't want to have to go, oh, wait, where do I put my hands? Or, you know, what way do I, is it here on the chest, or is it below the chest? Is it on the stomach? You want that heuristic perfectly well figured out, because generally, if you do that, it's going to help the person get whatever's choking them out. Now, it's not always successful. Sometimes the Heimlich maneuver doesn't always work. And there are some other solutions for helping someone choke other than the Heimlich maneuver. The other thing is the Heimlich maneuver can actually cause damage itself, such that if you put pressure on the chest and you pull in hard enough, which you're supposed to do, you can crack the ribs. And if you balance cracking ribs with whether you choke to death, it's better to take a broken rib than to choke, right? But it's not perfect, but it is a good rule of thumb. That's a heuristic. Let me give you another heuristic that you have. All right, you're walking on some trail. I don't know. I'm not really sure of good trails. I think most people here are from Allendale, I want to say. I don't know how many good trails are out near Allendale, but let's say you're out in the wilderness. Okay, you got a machete. You're making your own trail, and you're going around about your business, and then right next to you, a bush starts to rustle. What do you do?
Look and see what's there.
Okay, first heuristic is, well, what was that? You look, right? Then what?
Depending on what it is kind of how your reaction is.
Let's say you can't see what it is. You just know that the bush is rustling. What do you do? Do you approach it? Do you run away? And then go away? Yeah, I would probably go away too. I probably wouldn't, I don't know, maybe I'm just a cautious person. But my heuristic is not, oh, there's something rustling over there. I wonder what it is. Let me get closer and check it out. I think most people's response is, look, check out what it is, but then maybe actually back away slowly, right? That's the rule of thumb. Now that's a good rule of thumb if then, say, in that bush, maybe there's something like a bobcat, right? If you got close to that bush, that was your rule of thumb, then you would potentially be attacked, right? That thing could do some serious damage to you. So a good rule of thumb in that case. But let's imagine another case. Maybe there's an infant in there. Maybe someone abandoned a child and now it's in that bush and it's rustling around. If you back away from that and you don't explore what's in there, the child could die. So in general, it's a good rule of thumb to back away from bushes because there could be harm to you, but it's not always going to be the correct decision. That's a heuristic, okay? A rule of thumb, a simple, efficient way of solving a problem that isn't always necessarily correct. Now, many of our heuristics develop early or they're heavily influenced by biology. So we're going to see, when I describe neurons, what I'll be describing for you is what is happening within your nervous system, what's happening within a neuron when you actually engage a heuristic. When you use a heuristic, what does that look like on the inside? And so it's going to be heavily influenced by biology and so forth and so on. But a lot of the heuristics can actually just develop early on as well. So let me give you some examples of heuristics that you didn't have to learn, all right? First, if you take a child, a young infant, barely can interact with the world, and you gently touch the bottom of its foot. So this is the foot, okay? And this side is going to be the bottom. So you brush the inside of the foot. What happens? What does that child do? Anyone work with infants? Okay, so sometimes they'll laugh if they're especially good-natured. But there's something that actually happens to the foot that all children will do when you stimulate.
They jerk the foot.
So one thing is they'll usually jerk it. That's good. They'll move it away. And there's also something else. So that is a heuristic. They'll move it away. What happens to the shape? Anyone know what happens to the shape?
They kind of like bend their foot.
They do. Yeah, it curls. That's a response that every baby has. If you gently brush, yep, they bend their toes. If you gently brush the inside of the foot, they'll bend their toes a little bit. Many of them will jerk away, especially if it's sudden and unexpected. If it's like the mother or the father and they're being held, and so it's not surprising that the bottom of their foot would get stimulated, then maybe they don't jerk their foot away. But even if they're expecting it, you brush the bottom of that foot, they curl their toes. Now, why does that exist? Why curl your toes like that? Why is that a reflex? Why would it tingle?
The bottom of your foot is sensitive.
And it is, and the nerves will be responsible for it. But why should we have that response pre-built into a baby? Why do all babies do that?
Couldn't it be just in case like something happens and like the foot gets injured, the baby or even the like the adult will like feel it and sense it so they know to get help?
Ah, okay. So the jerking away when a child moves its leg away, that is a defensive response. So you have a defensive response like that too. If you dangle your foot down in front of you and then you hit, so if you feel your knee, there's a space right between your kneecap and where your leg bone begins. If you, right in between there's kind of a soft spot. If you hit that with your hand, you just kind of get your fingers in there and kind of strike it very quickly. If your leg is dangling, what your leg will do is it will actually kick forward. It's a reflex. That's a heuristic. It's a rule of thumb that your leg has, that if something hits this sensitive part, I should kick. Because if I kick, I might if that thing is going to injure me, I'm going to kick that thing away. It's good to have that kick response. For the toe curling, there are actually some pretty complicated ones for that. So no one's exactly sure. No one's definitively proved why that happens to be the case. But there is, within our ancestral line, it turns out that some of the other primates that we are related to have really long toes. And so those toes can actually be used like hands to grip things. The idea is, because we share a common ancestry with those types of primates, it's possible that it's a response of the nervous system that's left over. It's not useful to us anymore, but in other primate species, if something were to graze across your foot, you might want to grab onto it. And so having that curl response would cause your foot to curl onto whatever is touching it, to grab on. And that's defensive too. So if you're falling from something and then a branch grazes across your foot, if you suddenly grab with your foot, it's going to save your life. This happens with hands too. If you kind of graze the inside of the hand of an infant, the infant will tend to grab, because they are, again, essentially pre-programmed to grab stuff. All right. I'm going to give you one more example because I know we're almost out of time. I want to go through this fairly quickly. But here's another heuristic we have. You're out on a date. That date is going super well. You're jiving, you're loving each other. So you decide, you know what, let's go back to our place. You come back to my place, we'll watch some Netflix, we'll watch some TV, watch a movie or something for a little while. So you get there, you're on the couch together and you're cuddling, and maybe you start to kiss a little bit and you get all romantic and you're watching the movie. And then afterwards, you're kind of having like this moment where you're talking and you're sharing stories because you feel really connected to this person. And you start telling a story about, once you kind of have this family story of your grandmother who did this really embarrassing thing once, and the whole family knows about it, and it's extremely funny. And the person you're with goes, that's really funny. Actually, my family has this very similar story. Our grandmother did the same thing. And you're like, oh, that's just so interesting. What's your grandmother's name? And it's like, oh, it's this name. And you start to realize in that moment that you both have the same grandmother. What's your heuristic in that response, in that situation?
You feel kind of disgusted.
Yeah, disgust, right? Yeah, suddenly, oh no, we're genetically related. Your first response is, yeah. First response is disgust, and then it might actually be physically get away from the other person, right? You were kissing them, you were cuddling, and now suddenly this information is important enough that it motivates you to get away from them. Maybe even leave and say, you know what, this was a really great and kind of embarrassing date, but let's not do this again. Why? Does anyone know why humans, and this is not just true of humans, this is true of really any sexually reproducing species. Why do animals tend to avoid incest? Why do they tend to avoid reproducing with individuals who are genetically related to them?
Is it like because study shows like you can have disorders and stuff like that with your reproduction?
Yes. So yeah, when you have people of the same genetic lineage mating together and they produce children, you're more likely to pass on any harmful genes that may be within your family. This is actually very common. So let me give you one example just before, I know we're running out of time. Let me give you one example. Within the Jewish population, there's a disease called Tay-Sachs disease. It's carried by a recessive gene, and so it's possible that you can actually inherit one of those genes, but you don't get the disease. And so you could be a carrier of the disease. If you then have children with someone else who also has that disease, there's a higher chance that the child will inherit from mom and dad 2 genes that code for Tay-Sachs. If that child gets both genes, Tay-Sachs is really horrible. It's a respiratory disease that tends to like gums up the whole system, and so usually children will die within like several months to a year of being born because they can't breathe. So it can be really harmful, possibly to have sex with, to produce offspring with someone else who's in that close genetic lineage. And so to some degree, it's healthier to mate with people who are genetically dissimilar to you, who are not within your direct family line. So the idea is we have this built-in heuristic, this rule of thumb that says, if you know that someone is genetically related to you, do not try to mate with them. Be disgusted by that. And so it protects you from that. All right. Keep these heuristics in mind, all right? This is going to help because I'm going to make the argument that heuristics are these cognitive biases that I went over last lecture, all right? And I'll try to make this connection more explicit next time, but keep this in mind as you do your work for this week. Any questions? All right, thank you all for being here. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your holiday day, and I'll see you next week. Let me know if you have any questions, okay?